Ella Morgan never expected more from life than hard work and quiet survival, until a single invitation changed everything. Thrust into a world of wealth and privilege, she becomes the unexpected center of attention at the Governor's Cup. But is she being set up for failure, or is this her chance to prove she belongs? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the window as Ella Morgan wiped the sweat from her brow. She had been cleaning the massive ranch house since 5 in the morning, and there was still so much to do before her employer returned home. At 35, Ella had spent the last 3 years working as a housekeeper at Westfield Ranch, one of the largest and most successful horse breeding operations in the county. "Miss Ella, are you in here?" came a voice from the doorway. Ella turned to see Tommy, one of the young stable hands, standing awkwardly in the entryway to the living room. His boots were muddy, and she had just mopped the floor. "Tommy, please," she said, pointing to his feet. "I just cleaned in here." The boy looked down and jumped back onto the porch. "Sorry, Miss Ella, I forgot. Mr. Graham just called from the airport. He's on his way back from Dallas with some fancy friends, and he wants everything perfect. Said to tell you to prepare the guest rooms and make sure there's champagne chilling." Ella sighed. Of course he did. Graham Westfield never gave more than a few hours' notice when he decided to entertain. At 42, the ranch owner had inherited his father's empire 5 years ago and had been living like a king ever since. Handsome, wealthy, and completely self-absorbed, Graham treated the ranch more like a playground for his rich friends than the working farm it had been under his father's care. "How many guests?" Ella asked, already mentally rearranging her day. "He didn't say, but he's bringing Ms. Victoria with him." Ella's heart sank. Victoria Chambers was Graham's fiancée, a Dallas socialite who made no secret of her disdain for country living, and especially for the staff. The woman seemed to take particular pleasure in finding fault with Ella's work. "Thank you, Tommy. I'd better get started on those rooms." As the boy scampered off, Ella leaned against her mop for a moment, allowing herself just one small moment of frustration before straightening her shoulders. She needed this job. After her parents had lost their small farm in a drought 5 years ago and then both passed within a year of each other, Ella had been left with nothing but debt and heartache. Working at Westfield Ranch had been her lifeline, even if it meant dealing with Graham's arrogance and Victoria's cruelty. 3 hours later, Ella heard the sound of cars coming up the long driveway. She had just finished arranging fresh flowers in the last guest room and hurried downstairs to meet her employer and his guests. "Darling, it's absolutely charming in that rustic sort of way," came Victoria's voice, dripping with condescension as she entered the house. "But I still don't understand why we couldn't just stay at the hotel in town. It's so much more civilized." Graham laughed, his deep voice filling the entryway. "Because Westfield horses are the best in the country, and my friends want to see where champions are born." Ella stood quietly by the wall as Graham entered, followed by Victoria and 4 other elegantly dressed people. Graham was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair showing just a touch of silver at the temples. Despite his arrogance, Ella couldn't deny he was handsome in his tailored suit. Victoria, draped in designer clothes and dripping with jewelry, looked like she'd stepped off a fashion runway rather than a plane. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo, and her manicured hand clutched Graham's arm possessively. "Ah, Ella," Graham said, noticing her. "I see Tommy delivered my message. Rooms are ready?" "Yes, Mr. Westfield." "Guest rooms are prepared, and there's champagne chilling in the kitchen." Victoria's eyes swept over Ella's simple dress and apron with poorly disguised distaste. "I hope you've aired out the linens properly this time. Last visit, everything smelled like it had been stored for years." Ella bit the inside of her cheek. "Yes, ma'am. Fresh linens on all the beds." Graham barely acknowledged the exchange as he turned to introduce his friends. "Everyone, drop your bags here. Ella will take them up later. Let me show you around the property first." As the group moved toward the back of the house to access the grounds, one of the women, a redhead in her 40s wearing what Ella guessed was a very expensive silk blouse, whispered loudly to Victoria, "Is that your housekeeper? Darling, she's practically a pioneer woman. So quaint." Victoria laughed. "I know. Graham refuses to hire a proper Staff says these local people are more authentic, as if authenticity matters when it comes to service. Their voices faded as they exited onto the back porch, but the sting of their words remained. Ella took a deep breath and began gathering their designer luggage to carry upstairs. For the next 3 days, Ella did her best to remain invisible while keeping the house running smoothly. She prepared breakfast before dawn, cleaned while the guests were out touring the ranch or visiting nearby attractions, and stayed late into the evening to clean up after their lavish dinners. On the third night, as she was clearing the dining room table, after the guests had moved to the living room for drinks, she overheard their conversation. "So, Graham," said one of the men, a silver-haired investment banker named Richard, "Victoria tells us you're entering Thunder's Legacy and the Governor's Cup next weekend." "Absolutely," Graham replied, the pride evident in his voice. "He's the grandson of my father's best stallion. The bloodline is impeccable." "The Governor's Cup is quite the event," Richard's wife commented. "Everyone who's anyone will be there." Victoria laughed lightly. "It's the social event of the season. I've already had my outfit specially made. It cost more than some people's cars." "Speaking of which," Richard said, "did you hear that John Preston's daughter is hosting a pre-race cocktail party? Invitation only, of course." "Of course," Victoria echoed. "We'll be sitting in the owner's box with the governor. I can't wait to see Caroline Wilson's face." She thought her husband's horse was a shoe-in before Graham entered Thunder's Legacy. Ella tried to focus on gathering plates quietly, but her hand slipped, causing a fork to clatter loudly against a china dish. All eyes turned to her, and she felt her face flush with embarrassment. "Sorry," she murmured, quickly retrieving the fork. "Do be careful with those dishes," Victoria said sharply. "They're Limoges." One of the women, Ella thought her name was Diane, looked at her curiously. "Have you ever been to the races, dear?" "Before?" Ella could answer. Victoria laughed. "Of course not. The Governor's Cup isn't exactly an event for the help." Graham chuckled along with his fiancée. "Can you imagine? Ella wouldn't know which fork to use for the appetizer, let alone how to behave in the owner's box." The group laughed and Ella felt her cheeks burn hotter. "I've been to the county fair races," she said quietly, not sure why she felt compelled to speak up. "My father used to take me every year. This only made them laugh harder." "The county fair," Victoria repeated, wiping away a pretend tear. "How adorable. Graham, it's like having our own little country bumpkin mascot." Graham raised his whiskey glass. "To Ella and her county fair races, a world away from the Governor's Cup." As they toasted and laughed, something shifted in Ella. The humiliation burned through her, replacing her usual quiet acceptance with a spark of anger. She straightened her back slightly and continued clearing dishes with as much dignity as she could muster. "Actually," she said, surprising even herself by speaking again, "I used to help my father train quarter horses before we lost our farm." The room fell silent for a moment. "Is that so?" said Richard, looking mildly interested. "And what does a housekeeper know about thoroughbred racing?" Before Ella could respond, the redhead, Melissa, spoke up. "Oh, Richard, don't encourage her. Next thing you know, she'll be asking for an invitation to the Governor's Cup." Graham's eyes suddenly lit up, but not with kindness. There was a mischievous, almost cruel glint in them that made Ella nervous. "You know what? That's exactly what I'm going to do," he announced. Victoria turned to him, confused. "Do what, darling?" "Invite Ella to the Governor's Cup." Graham smiled broadly. "What do you say, Ella? Would you like to see how the other half lives? Come watch Thunder's Legacy make history." Ella stood frozen, dishes in hand, unsure how to respond. She could feel Victoria's icy stare and see the amused expressions on the guests' faces. This wasn't a genuine invitation. It was another opportunity for them to laugh at her. "Mr. Westfield, I don't think—" she began. "Nonsense," Graham interrupted. "I insist. Consider it a bonus for your dedicated service." The way he emphasized those last words made it clear this was some kind of joke to him. Victoria's face had hardened. "Graham, be serious. She can't possibly—" "I've decided," Graham said firmly, though his smile remained playful as he addressed his friends. "Won't it be entertaining? Our very own Cinderella story." The others chuckled, clearly understanding that Ella was to be the punchline of an elaborate joke. "What do you say, Ella?" Graham pressed. "Next Saturday, The biggest race of the season. You can see what real horse racing looks like. Ella should have politely declined. She should have recognized the trap being laid for her. But standing there, dishes in hand, something stubborn and proud deep inside her refused to back down. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Westfield," she said quietly. "I would be happy to attend." Graham looked momentarily surprised before recovering his smirk. Excellent, it's settled then. As Ella retreated to the kitchen with the dishes, she could hear Victoria's angry whispers and the continued laughter of the guests. What had she just agreed to? And more importantly, how would she survive being the entertainment for Graham and his cruel friends? The rest of the week passed in a blur. Graham's guests departed the next day, but Victoria remained, spending most of her time on the phone or shopping in town. She barely acknowledged Ella, except to issue commands or complaints. Graham, meanwhile, spent his days at the stables working with the trainers to prepare Thunder's legacy for the race. Occasionally, Ella would glimpse him from the house windows, powerful and confident as he directed his employees or exercised one of his prized horses. On the Thursday before the race, Ella was hanging freshly laundered curtains in the study when Graham entered unexpectedly. "Ah, Ella. Good. I wanted to confirm you're still planning to attend the race on Saturday." Ella carefully stepped down from the stepladder. "If the invitation still stands, Mr. Westfield." Graham leaned against his desk, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It does, though Victoria is less than thrilled." "I understand." "If it would be more convenient for me to decline," Ella offered, hoping he might allow her a graceful exit. But Graham shook his head. No. I've already told everyone you're coming. Can't disappoint them now, can we?" The gleam in his eye told her exactly what he meant. His friends were looking forward to their entertainment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Here's your ticket and a pass for the owner's box. Be there by noon. And Ella?" He looked her up and down critically. "Do try to dress appropriately. It's a formal event." As he walked out, Ella looked down at the envelope in her hand, a mixture of dread and determination washing over her. She had no appropriate outfit, no knowledge of high society etiquette, and no illusions about why she'd been invited. She was walking into a trap, purely for the amusement of people who saw her as nothing more than a servant. But for the first time in years, the spark of defiance that had flared when they mocked her at dinner still burned. If Graham Westfield wanted to humiliate her, she wouldn't make it easy for him. That evening, after finishing her work, Ella drove her old pickup truck into town. Her first stop was the local thrift store, where Mrs. Patterson, the elderly owner, greeted her warmly. "Ella, dear, what brings you in so late?" Ella explained her situation, though she softened the details about why she'd been invited, and Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed with understanding. "So they think they can make a fool of you, do they?" The older woman shook her head. "Not on my watch. Come with me." In the back room, Mrs. Patterson unlocked a special closet. "These are items I've been saving for the right occasion, not everything. That comes through here goes on the sales floor, you know." She pulled out a garment bag and carefully unzipped it, to reveal a stunning vintage dress in a soft shade of blue-green that reminded Ella of a mountain lake. This came from the estate of Mrs. Eleanor Harrington. She was quite the fashionable woman in her day, and we were similar in size to you. It's from the early 60s, but classic design never goes out of style. The dress was simple yet elegant, a sleeveless sheath with a bateau neckline and a subtle flare at the hem. The fabric had a gentle sheen that caught the light as Mrs. Patterson held it up. "It's beautiful," Ella breathed, reaching out to touch the material. "Try it on," Mrs. Patterson insisted, shooing her behind a screen. The dress fit as if it had been made for her. The color brought out the green in Ella's hazel eyes and complemented her chestnut hair. "Perfect," Mrs. Patterson declared when Ella emerged. "Now I have shoes and a small handbag that will match. You'll need a hat, of course. It's traditional for the women to wear hats at these fancy races." "I can't afford all this," Ella protested. Knowing her limited budget, Mrs. Patterson waved away her concern. "Consider it a loan. Just bring everything back in good condition." Her eyes twinkled. "And promise to tell me every detail about their faces when they see you." Ella's next stop was the town library, where she spent 2 hours researching the Governor's Cup, thoroughbred racing, and proper etiquette for high society events. By the time she left, her notebook was filled with information, and her mind was racing with possibilities. Her final visit was to see Martha Jenkins, who had been her mother's best friend and was the most talented seamstress in the county. After explaining her plan, Martha immediately offered to help with alterations and to create a special accessory that would make Ella's outfit truly unique. "Your mother would be so proud to see you standing tall," Martha told her as she took measurements. "She never let anyone make her feel small, and neither should you." As Ella drove back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, her anxiety began to transform into something else: determination. Graham Westfield had invited her to this race to mock her, to prove she didn't belong in his world. He expected her to be intimidated, to fumble and embarrass herself. But Graham had made a critical error. He had underestimated her. Growing up on a small farm, helping her father with his beloved quarter horses, Ella had learned more about the animals than most of the wealthy owners who treated them as status symbols, and years of watching her parents fight to save their farm had taught her how to face impossible odds with dignity. As she pulled up to the staff entrance of Westfield Ranch, Ella made herself a promise. She would go to the Governor's Cup, not as the punchline of Graham's cruel joke, but as her true self, a woman who understood and loved horses, who carried her parents' strength within her, and who refused to be shamed for where she came from. Graham Westfield thought he was setting her up for humiliation, but Ella Morgan had other plans. Saturday morning dawned clear and perfect. Ella woke before sunrise, her stomach fluttering with nerves. The Governor's Cup was today, and despite her determination, she couldn't help wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. She took extra care with her appearance, washing her hair and letting it air dry into its natural waves instead of pulling it back in her usual practical bun. After a light breakfast, she laid out the vintage dress Mrs. Patterson had loaned her, along with the shoes and handbag. The hat was a work of art. Martha Jenkins had taken a simple straw base and transformed it with delicate silk flowers in shades that matched the dress perfectly. But what made it truly special was the hand-embroidered band around the crown, tiny horses stitched in silver thread that caught the light when Ella turned her head. It had taken Martha 2 late nights to complete, and she'd refused to accept payment. "Just promise to hold your head high," the older woman had said. By 11, Ella was dressed and ready. She barely recognized the woman in her small bathroom mirror. The elegant stranger looking back at her wore a perfectly fitted vintage dress that hugged her curves before flaring gently at the knees. The color made her skin glow and brought out highlights in her chestnut hair, which she'd styled in soft waves around her shoulders. Martha had insisted on applying a touch of makeup, nothing dramatic, just enough to enhance Ella's natural features. A hint of mascara made her hazel eyes more prominent, and a soft rose lipstick added color to her face. "Remember," Martha had instructed, "when they look at you like you don't belong, look right back as if you own the place." Taking a deep breath, Ella climbed into her old pickup truck and headed for the Governor's Cup. The Lakeside Downs racetrack was an impressive facility about an hour's drive from Westfield Ranch. As Ella approached, she could see the parking areas filling with luxury cars. Sleek sports cars, high-end SUVs, and even a few limousines lined the VIP section. Her weathered pickup looked woefully out of place as she pulled into the general parking area, but Ella refused to feel ashamed. She checked her appearance one last time in the rearview mirror, straightened her hat, and stepped out of the truck. The walk to the entrance was longer than she expected, and she could feel curious glances from other attendees as she made her way toward the gate. Many women wore designer outfits with logos Ella recognized from magazines, paired with hats that probably cost more than she made in a month. At the VIP entrance, she presented her ticket and the owner's box pass. The attendant's eyebrows raised slightly as he looked from the pass to her face, clearly trying to place her among the usual elite crowd. "First time at the Governor's Cup?" he asked as he scanned her ticket. "Yes," Ella admitted with a small smile, "but not my first time at a racetrack." Inside, the venue was even more impressive. The grandstand rose in sweeping tiers, and beyond it, she could see the emerald green oval of the track. Well-dressed crowds milled about, many holding champagne flutes despite the early hour. The women were dressed in colorful outfits and elaborate hats, while the men wore expensive suits and sport coats. Ella consulted the small map on her program and made her way toward the owner's boxes. With each step, she straightened her posture a little more, remembering Martha's advice. The owner's box section was on an elevated level with an excellent view of both the track and the winner's circle. As Ella approached, she could see Graham, standing with Victoria and several others, champagne in hand. Victoria was draped in what was clearly a designer outfit, a bold red dress with a dramatic hat to match. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. Ella hesitated for just a moment, then took a deep breath and walked forward. It was Richard who noticed her first. His conversation with Graham faltered mid-sentence as his eyes fixed on something behind Graham's shoulder. One by one, the others in the group turned to look. Graham was the last to turn around. When he did, the smirk he'd been wearing froze on his face. For a long moment, no one spoke. Ella stood perfectly still, allowing them to take in her transformation. The elegant vintage dress, the perfectly styled hair, the handcrafted hat with its subtle, shimmering embroidery. "Ella?" Graham finally said, his voice colored with disbelief. Victoria's face tightened, her eyes narrowing as she took in Ella's appearance. "Well," she said with forced cheerfulness, "you certainly cleaned up better than I expected." "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Westfield," Ella said calmly, looking directly at Graham. "The track is beautiful." Graham seemed unable to form a complete sentence. "Yes, I didn't." Richard stepped forward, suddenly all charm. "My dear, you look absolutely stunning. That dress is exquisite, vintage Givenchy, isn't it?" Ella smiled. "I believe it is, though I can't take credit for recognizing it myself." "Where on earth did you find such a piece?" asked Melissa, the redhead who had mocked Ella at dinner. "A very kind friend loaned it to me for today," Ella replied. "And that hat," exclaimed Diane, Richard's wife. "Those embroidered horses are divine. Is that a custom piece?" "It is," Ella said, touching the brim lightly. "Another friend made it for me." Victoria slipped her arm through Graham's possessively. "How fortunate you are to have such generous friends," she said, her tone making it clear she doubted Ella's story. "Graham, darling, shouldn't we be checking on Thunder's legacy before the race?" But Graham seemed reluctant to leave. He was still staring at Ella with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. "Of course," he said finally. "Ella, make yourself comfortable. There's champagne and hors d'oeuvres. We'll be back shortly." As Graham and Victoria walked away, Ella overheard Victoria hissing, "What is going on? She looks like she belongs here." Richard immediately offered Ella a glass of champagne. "So, Ella, Graham tells us you used to work with horses before becoming his housekeeper." Ella accepted the glass. "Yes, my father bred and trained quarter horses. Nothing. They're as grand as Westfield Ranch, but he taught me everything I know about horses." "Quarter horses," Melissa said with a slight wrinkle of her nose. "Aren't those the ones they use for rodeos?" "Among other things," Ella replied pleasantly. "They're incredibly versatile, but I've always admired thoroughbreds for their speed and heart." To Ella's surprise, several people seemed genuinely interested in her knowledge. As they waited for the first race to begin, she found herself fielding questions about different breeds and training techniques. Years of helping her father had given her insights that even these wealthy horse owners found valuable. When Graham and Victoria returned, they found Ella at the center of an engaged group, animatedly describing the difference between a horse's natural gait and one that had been improperly trained. "The body doesn't lie," she was saying. "You can always tell by watching how they move, whether they're comfortable or forcing themselves into an unnatural position." "Fascinating," Richard said. "I've never thought of it that way." Graham cleared his throat and the group turned toward him. "I see you're making friends," he said to Ella, his tone difficult to interpret. "Your housekeeper is quite knowledgeable about horses, Graham," Richard commented. "You never mentioned that." Graham's eyes met Ella's. "No," he said slowly. "I suppose I didn't." Victoria quickly changed the subject, directing everyone's attention to the upcoming race and making a show of consulting her program. "Oh, look, Caroline Wilson's horse is in the second race. Shall we place some friendly wagers?" As the others turned to discuss betting, Graham moved to stand beside Ella at the railing of the box. "You're full of surprises today," he said quietly. Ella kept her eyes on the track. "I'm just being myself, Mr. Westfield." "Graham," he corrected. "I think we can drop the formality for today." She glanced at him then, noting the curious expression on his face. He seemed genuinely perplexed, as if seeing her for the first time. "Graham?" she repeated softly, then turned back to the track as the announcer called the horses to the starting gates for the first race. As the day progressed, Ella found herself increasingly comfortable in surroundings that should have intimidated her. Between races, she mingled with Graham's friends and other horse owners, many of whom seemed charmed by her authentic knowledge and enthusiasm for the sport. Victoria watched with growing irritation as Ella became the center of attention. She had expected Graham's housekeeper to be awkward and out of place, an easy target for ridicule. Instead, Ella was navigating the social waters with unexpected grace, and worse, looking beautiful while doing it. "For your dress is stunning," one woman commented to Ella. "So elegant. They don't make them like that anymore. And it suits you perfectly," added another. "Most young women today prefer those tight, revealing styles, but there's something to be said for classic elegance." Victoria tugged at the neckline of her own dress, suddenly aware of how it might appear in comparison. The greatest surprise came when they visited the stables between races. Graham had suggested they check on Thunder's legacy before his big race, and the entire group had followed. The stables at Lakeside Downs were state-of-the-art, with spacious stalls and immaculate aisles. Thunder's legacy was a magnificent stallion, 17 hands of rippling muscle with a glossy dark bay coat. When their group approached, the horse tossed his head nervously, sensing the tension and excitement of race day. "He seems agitated," Victoria commented, staying well back from the stall. "It's normal pre-race nerves," Graham assured her, though Ella noticed a flicker of concern cross his face. Without thinking, Ella stepped forward. "May I?" she asked Graham, gesturing toward you, the horse. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Ella approached the stall slowly, making soft, clicking sounds with her tongue. Thunder's legacy turned his head toward her, ears pricked forward with interest. "Hello, beautiful," she murmured, extending her hand flat with a small apple, slice she'd saved from the refreshment table. "Aren't you something special?" To everyone's amazement, the nervous stallion lowered his head and gently took the offering from her palm. Ella stroked his nose, speaking in low, soothing tones that seemed to calm the animal immediately. "Would you look at that?" Richard said. "He's like a different horse." Graham stepped closer, watching in wonder as Ella checked the stallion's legs, with practiced hands speaking to him all the while. "He's in excellent condition," she said to Graham, "strong and ready, but he's sensitive. You can see it in his eyes. He's picking up on everyone's excitement." "What would you suggest?" Graham asked, and Ella was surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. "If possible, have your trainer walk him somewhere quiet for about 20 minutes before the race. Let him settle his mind," and she hesitated, unsure if she was overstepping. "Go on," Graham encouraged. "When they saddle him, make sure the girth isn't too tight right away. Let him get used to it gradually. Some thoroughbreds are sensitive about that, and if he's uncomfortable at the start, it could affect his whole race." Graham stared at her for a long moment, then turned to his trainer who had been hovering nearby. "Did you hear that, Joe? Let's try it." The trainer nodded, clearly impressed with Ella's assessment. As they walked back toward the grandstand, Graham fell into step beside. "Yeah. Where did you learn all that?" he asked. "My father," she replied. "He always said horses are like people. They perform best when they feel understood." Graham was quiet for a moment. "I never knew." "You never asked," Ella said simply. "Don't buy." The time Thunder's Legacy's race was about to begin, Ella had become something of a sensation among Graham's circle. Word had spread about her knowledge of horses and her easy way with the nervous stallion. Several owners had engaged her in serious conversations about their own horses, and even a few trainers had sought her opinion. Victoria was fuming. What was supposed to be her triumphant day showing off her successful fiancé and his prize racehorse to society's elite, had somehow become the Ella show. Worse still was the way Graham kept looking at his housekeeper, as if seeing something valuable he'd previously overlooked. "Isn't it time to put her back in her place?" Victoria hissed to Graham as they took their seats for the main race. "This little Cinderella act has gone on long enough," Graham frowned. "She's not putting on an act, Victoria. That's what's so surprising." "Oh, please," Victoria scoffed. "The vintage designer dress, the custom hat? Someone's coached her very well for this little stunt." Before Graham could respond, the announcer called for the Governor's Cup race, and everyone's attention turned to the track. 8 thoroughbreds paraded past the grandstand, jockeys in colourful silks perched on their backs. Thunder's Legacy looked magnificent in Westfield's green and gold colours. As the horses loaded into the starting gates, Ella found herself holding her breath. Despite everything, Graham's initial cruelty, Victoria's hostility, she genuinely wanted the beautiful stallion to win. The bell rang, the gates opened, and the horses exploded onto the track. The crowd roared as the thoroughbreds thundered past, jockeys low over their necks. Thunder's Legacy broke well and settled into 4th position along the rail. "Good position," Ella murmured. "He's not fighting the bit." Graham glanced at her, then back to the track, his face tense with concentration. As they rounded the first turn, Thunder's Legacy moved up to 3rd, running smooth and controlled. By the backstretch, he had advanced to 2nd and was gaining on the leader. "Come on, boy," Ella whispered, caught up in the excitement despite herself. The horses rounded the final turn, and Thunder's Legacy made his move, surging forward with powerful strides. The crowd was on its feet, shouting and cheering as the stallion pulled even with the leader, then gradually inched ahead. "Go!" Graham shouted, his usual composure forgotten. In the final stretch, Thunder's Legacy found another gear and pulled away from the field, crossing the finish line 2 lengths ahead of his nearest competitor. The owner's box erupted in celebration. Graham was beaming, accepting handshakes and congratulations from all sides. Victoria threw her arms around him, planting a possessive kiss on his lips for the cameras that were surely watching. But in the midst of his celebration, Graham's eyes sought out Ella. When he found her, her face glowing with genuine joy for the horse's victory, something shifted inside him. She wasn't an employee in that moment, or a curiosity, or the target of a cruel joke. She was simply a woman who shared his love for these magnificent animals, celebrating a moment of pure victory. "We did it," he said to her over the noise of the crowd, as if she had been part of his team all along. Ella smiled back, unable to help herself. He was magnificent. After the race, tradition dictated that the winning owner and his party go down to the winner's circle for photographs and the presentation of the trophy. Without thinking, Graham took Ella's elbow. "Come with us," he said. Victoria immediately protested. "Graham, that's hardly appropriate. The winner's circle is for family and close friends, not—" "Ella helped with Thunder's Legacy today," Graham interrupted. "I want her there." Before Victoria could argue further, they were swept, along with the crowd heading toward the track. Photographers and reporters were already gathering around the winner's circle, where Thunder's Legacy was being cooled down by his handlers. In the bright sunshine of the winner's circle, with cameras flashing and the gleaming silver trophy being presented, Ella should have felt out of place. But as she stood slightly to the side, watching Graham accept congratulations from the governor, she felt a strange sense of belonging. The stallion, still breathing heavily from his exertion, turned, his head toward her and nickered softly. Ella reached out automatically to stroke his neck, murmuring praise for his performance. A photographer, noticing the horse's response to her, called out, "Miss, could we get a shot of you with the horse? He seems to like you." Before Ella could respond, Victoria stepped between them. "I don't think so," she said firmly. "This is a family photo opportunity." But the stallion had other ideas. He stretched his neck around Victoria, seeking Ella's touch, nearly unseating the silk flower arrangement on Victoria's hat. The crowd laughed, and several cameras flashed, capturing Victoria's indignant expression. Graham, returning from accepting the trophy, took in the scene with amusement. "I think Thunder's Legacy has made his preference clear," he said, earning another laugh from the onlookers. Victoria's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Graham," she said through clenched teeth, "control your horse." "Come here, Ella," Graham said, ignoring his fiancée's glare. "Let's get that photo." The resulting picture, Graham holding the trophy, Ella beside him with one hand gently stroking Thunder's Legacy's neck, and the stallion looking content despite the crowd and cameras, would appear in the newspaper's sports section the next day. Victoria watched from the sidelines, seething. This was supposed to be her moment of social triumph, her opportunity to shine as the future Mrs. Graham Westfield. Instead, all eyes were on the housekeeper, who had somehow transformed into someone worthy of attention. As they walked back to the grandstand for the post-race celebrations, Victoria pulled her friend Melissa aside. "This has gone too far," she hissed. "Did you see how he looked at her? How everyone was falling all over themselves about her knowledge and that ridiculous dress?" Melissa nodded sympathetically. "It's absurd. She's still just the help no matter how she's dressed up." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she watched Graham lean down to hear something Ella was saying, a smile spreading across his face. "I need to remind everyone exactly who she is," Victoria said, "and I know just how to do it." Melissa raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "The charity gala at the Prestons next weekend," Victoria said, a plan forming in her mind. "Graham always brings a sizable donation check. This year, I think we'll have a special presentation." As Victoria outlined her scheme, a cold smile spread across her face. Ella Morgan might have won this round, but Victoria Chambers wasn't about to lose the war, or her future husband, to a housekeeper from nowhere. Meanwhile, blissfully unaware of the plot being hatched against her, Ella was experiencing one of the most wonderful days of her life. The excitement of the races, the thrill of Thunder's Legacy's victory, and most surprisingly, the growing warmth in Graham's eyes when he looked at her, all combined to create a day she would never forget. As the sun began to set over Lakeside Downs, casting a golden glow over the track, Graham found Ella standing alone at the railing, watching the horses being led back to the stables. "Thank you," he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. Ella looked up at him, surprised. "For what?" "For proving me wrong," he said simply. "I invited you here thinking—" He trailed off, seeming embarrassed by his original intentions. "I know." "Why you invited me," Ella said, her voice steady. "To have a laugh at my expense." Graham had the grace to look ashamed. "Yes, and I'm sorry for that. But today you showed everyone, what real class looks like. It has nothing to do with money or designer labels." For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the activity on the track below. "Will you be at the stables tomorrow?" Graham asked suddenly. "I'd like your opinion on a new filly we've just acquired." Ella turned to look at him, searching his face for signs of mockery, but finding only genuine interest. "I have Sundays off," she reminded him. "I know," he said. "Consider it a favor, not work. I'd value your input." Something warm unfurled in Ella's chest at his words. "All right," she agreed. "I'll come by in the morning." As she turned to leave, Graham caught her hand lightly. "Ella," he said, his voice low, "you were the most beautiful woman at the racetrack today. I wanted you to know that." Before she could respond, Victoria appeared at his side, slipping her arm through his possessively. "There you are, darling. Everyone's waiting for us at the champagne reception." Her eyes slid dismissively over Ella. "I'm sure Ella is tired and wants to get home, aren't you, dear?" Ella gently withdrew her hand from Graham's. "Yes, it has been a long day. Congratulations again on the win, Mr. Westfield." As she walked away, she could feel Graham's eyes following her. For the first time in years, something like hope bloomed in her heart. But as she glanced back and saw Victoria's calculating expression, Ella knew the day's triumph might have come at a cost she had yet to understand. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. Ella woke early, habits formed from years of farm work and then household duties, making it impossible to sleep in, even on her day off. For a moment she lay in bed, memories of the previous day washing over her. The races, Thunder's Legacies, victory, and most unsettling of all, the way Graham had looked at her. "You were the most beautiful woman at the racetrack today," His words echoed in her mind, sending a flutter through her chest that she quickly tried to suppress. Graham Westfield was engaged to Victoria. He was her employer, and until yesterday, he had barely seemed to notice her existence beyond her ability to keep his house in order. One day of kindness didn't erase years of indifference, she reminded herself firmly. Still, she found herself taking extra care with her appearance as she prepared to visit the stables. She chose a simple blue cotton dress, nothing fancy like yesterday's vintage treasure, but certainly nicer than her usual work clothes. She left her hair loose around her shoulders, remembering how Graham's eyes had lingered on it the day before. She drove to the ranch. Ella scolded herself for these foolish thoughts. Graham had asked for her opinion on a horse, that was all. It wasn't a romantic invitation, just a recognition of her knowledge. After years of being invisible to him, being seen for her skills was enough of a victory. The ranch was quiet when she arrived, most of the staff having the day off. Ella parked near the stables and made her way inside, breathing in the familiar sense of hay, leather, and horses. "Ella, you came." She turned to see Graham emerging from one of the stalls, dressed casually in jeans and a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Without his usual business attire, he looked younger, more approachable. The morning sunlight streaming through the stable windows caught the silver at his temples, making it shine. "I said I would," she replied simply. Something like pleasure flickered across his face. "Yes, you did. And after yesterday, I've learned not to underestimate your word." He gestured toward the far end of the stable. "The filly's down this way. I've had her for about a week." As they walked, Graham asked, "Have you returned to your regular clothes today? That dress yesterday was quite something." "It was borrowed," Ella admitted, "from a friend who owns the thrift store in town. I couldn't afford anything like that on my own." Graham looked thoughtful. "Yet you looked more at home in it than many women I know who spend thousands on their wardrobes." Before Ella could respond, they reached a stall where a delicate chestnut filly with a white blaze stood watching them cautiously. "This is Morning Glory," Graham said, his voice softening as he addressed the young horse. "She's got excellent bloodlines, but she's been difficult to handle. Spooks at everything, won't let the trainers near her left side, and refuses to be led into the trailer." Ella approached the stall slowly. The filly backed away, ears flattening slightly. "She's frightened," Ella observed quietly. "The previous owner said she was mistreated by a stable hand before he purchased her," Graham explained. "Now she doesn't trust anyone." Ella nodded, never taking her eyes off the filly. "May I go in?" Graham hesitated. "She's kicked 2 of my handlers already." "I'll be careful," Ella promised. After a moment, Graham nodded and unlatched the stall door. Ella entered slowly, keeping her movements smooth and deliberate. She didn't approach the filly directly, but instead stood quietly just inside the door, her body language open and non-threatening. "Hello, beautiful girl," she murmured. "No one's going to hurt you here." The filly watched her warily, nostrils flaring. Ella began humming softly, an old lullaby her mother used to sing. Gradually, she took a single step forward, then stopped, again giving the horse time to adjust to her presence. After several minutes of this patient approach, she was standing near enough to reach out a hand. "Look at her left side," Ella said softly to Graham, who was watching from the doorway. "See? The way she's protecting it. I think she may have been injured there." Graham stepped into the stall, careful to follow Ella's example of slow, deliberate movements. Together they stood quietly until the filly finally stretched her neck forward, curiosity overcoming fear. "That's it," Ella encouraged, letting the horse sniff her hand before gently stroking her neck. "You're safe now." With incredible patience, she worked her way around to the filly's left side, speaking soothingly the entire time. When she finally placed her hand on the horse's left flank, the filly flinched but didn't kick or bolt. "There's definitely something wrong here," Ella said, her fingers probing gently. "I think she may have a muscle injury that never healed properly. It's causing her pain when someone touches this area or when she's asked to load into a trailer, which would require her to push off with this leg." Graham moved closer to see. The vet checked her when she arrived, but didn't find anything. "It's subtle," Ella explained. "You have to know exactly where to look. My father had a mare with a similar issue years ago. It took months of gentle massage therapy and gradual exercise to help her recover. As they continued working with the filly, Ella demonstrated techniques her father had used: gentle stretches, careful pressure points, and soothing touch. To Graham's amazement, the frightened horse gradually relaxed under Ella's ministrations. "You mule, have a gift," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Ella smiled, focused on the horse. "Not a gift, just experience and patience. My father always said that horses never forget who hurts them or who helps them." Graham was quiet for a moment, watching her work. "I think that's true of people too," he said finally. Their eyes met, over the filly's back, and something unspoken passed between them. Ella was the first to look away, her cheeks warming. "I can show your stable manager how to continue these exercises," she offered. "With consistent care, she should improve significantly in a few weeks. Or you could come by regularly to work with her yourself," Graham suggested. "I'd pay you, of course." Ella considered the offer. "I don't need payment to help an animal in pain. Then consider it a professional consultation. Your knowledge is valuable, Ella. You should be compensated for it." The respect in his voice was something entirely new, and Ella found herself agreeing before she'd really thought it through. "All right, I could come by on my days off." They spent another hour with Morning Glory, with Ella demonstrating various techniques, and Graham proving himself a quick study. By the time they left the stall, the filly was following Ella around like an oversized puppy, nickering softly when Ella prepared to leave. "She's already bonded with you," Graham observed as they walked back toward the main stable doors. "She just needed someone to understand her pain," Ella replied. Outside, the late morning sun was warm on their faces. Graham hesitated, seeming reluctant for their time together to end. "Have you had breakfast?" he asked suddenly. "Mrs. Jimenez always leaves food in the main house kitchen before she takes Sundays off. I was about to fix something myself." Ella knew she should politely decline. Sharing a meal with her employer in his home, when she wasn't cooking or serving it, crossed a line in their relationship she wasn't sure should be crossed. But the genuine warmth in Graham's eyes made refusal difficult. "I could eat," she admitted. Graham smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Good. I make terrible coffee, but I've been told my omelettes are passable." As they walked toward the main house, Ella was acutely aware of how different this felt from her usual approach to the imposing structure. For 3 years, she had entered through the service door, arrived exactly on time for work, and focused solely on her duties. Now she was walking beside the owner, invited as a guest rather than an employee. In the kitchen, her domain during the week, Graham moved with unexpected confidence, gathering ingredients from the refrigerator and heating a pan on the stove. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to one of the stools at the large island. "Let me serve you for a change." As he prepared their meal, Graham asked Ella about her parents' farm and how she had learned so much about horses. Ella found herself sharing stories she hadn't thought about in years, helping her father deliver foals in the middle of the night, the first time she'd ridden bareback, and the old mare who would only take a bit if you sang to her first. "It sounds like you had a wonderful childhood," Graham commented, as he slid a perfect omelette onto her plate. "We didn't have much money," Ella admitted, "but we were happy. The drought changed everything, 5 years without enough rain, and even the hardest work couldn't save the farm." Graham sat across from her with his own plate. "Is that when you came to work here?" "Almost. My parents held on as long as they could, but the bank finally foreclosed. The stress was too much for my father's heart. He died 6 months later. My mother followed within the year." Ella hadn't meant to share so much, but there was something about Graham's attentive silence that invited confidence. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Ella nodded, taking a bite of her omelette to give herself a moment to regain her composure. "This is delicious," she said, deliberately changing the subject. Graham accepted, the shift with grace. "Don't sound so surprised," he teased. "I wasn't born with a silver spoon, you know. My mother insisted I learn basic cooking skills before she let me go to college." "I didn't know that," Ella said. "I assumed that I've always been wealthy." Graham smiled wryly. "My father built Westfield Ranch from nothing. He grew up poor, the son of a tenant farmer. Everything he achieved, he earned through hard work. And determination. You must have been very proud of him. I was, Graham said, his expression softening with memory. He was tough but fair. Expected a lot from everyone, including himself. His face clouded slightly. I'm not sure he'd recognize what I've done with his legacy. What do you mean? Graham stared down at his plate. When he died, I was 37 years old and had spent 15 years in corporate finance in Dallas. I knew how to make money and spend it, but I knew next to nothing about actually running a ranch. He looked up, meeting Ella's eyes. I've relied on managers and hired hands to do what my father did himself. I've treated this place more like a vacation home than the working ranch he built. There was genuine regret in his voice, and Ella found herself responding to his vulnerability. It's not too late to change that, she said gently. Maybe not, he agreed, holding her gaze for a long moment. The intimate atmosphere was broken by the sound of a car pulling up outside. Graham glanced toward the window. That would be Victoria, he said, his expression shifting back to its usual reserve. She mentioned she might stop by on her way back from church. Ella immediately stood, gathering her plate. I should go. You don't have to, Graham said, though his tone lacked conviction. Yes, I do. Ella rinsed her plate in the sink, uncomfortable, with the idea of Victoria finding her sharing a meal with Graham in his kitchen. Thank you for breakfast, and for asking my opinion about Morning Glory. Ella, Graham began, but before he could continue, the front door opened and Victoria's voice called out, Graham, where are you, darling? In the kitchen, he replied, never taking his eyes off Ella. Victoria appeared in the doorway, elegant, in a pale pink dress and matching jacket. Her smile faltered when she saw Ella. What's this? She asked, her voice coolly polite. Ella came by to look at the new filly, Graham explained. She thinks she's identified the problem the vet missed. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. How helpful. On her day off, no less. I was just leaving, Ella said, moving toward the door. Good morning, Miss Chambers. Before you go, Victoria said, her voice suddenly warm, though her eyes remained cold. I wanted to invite you to the Preston Charity Gala next Saturday night. Ella stopped, surprised. Me? Yes, Victoria said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. After your wonderful showing at the races yesterday, everyone's been talking about you. I thought it would be lovely to have you there for the presentation. Presentation? Graham asked, looking confused. Victoria turned to him. I was going to surprise you, darling, but since Ella's here, I've arranged for you to present your donation check during the gala. It's for a wonderful cause, providing riding therapy for disadvantaged children. Graham still looked puzzled. That sounds fine, but why invite Ella? Victoria's smile widened. Because of her obvious connection with horses, of course. I thought she could say a few words about the therapeutic value of horse-human relationships. Given her background, it would be so authentic. Ella's instincts were screaming that this sudden kindness from Victoria was not what it seemed, but refusing would make her appear ungrateful, especially with Graham watching the exchange curiously. That's very thoughtful, Ella said carefully, but I'm not sure I'd be comfortable speaking in front of a crowd. Oh, it would just be a minute or two, Victoria assured her. Nothing formal, and naturally I'll help you find something appropriate to wear. Her eyes flickered over Ella's simple cotton dress. We can't expect another miracle from the thrift store? The subtle dig wasn't lost on Ella, but before she could respond, Graham spoke up. If Ella doesn't want to speak, she shouldn't have to, he said firmly. Victoria turned to him with wide, innocent eyes. But darling, I've already mentioned it to the Prestons. They were so excited about the idea. It would be awkward to change plans now. Graham frowned but didn't argue further. He looked at Ella. It's completely your choice. Don't feel pressured. Victoria's smile remained fixed, but there was a challenge in her eyes that Ella couldn't ignore. Whatever game Victoria was playing, refusing to participate would only make her look cowardly. It's fine, Ella said finally. I'm happy to help with such a good cause. Victoria clapped her hands together. Wonderful. I'll pick you up at 6 on Saturday. We can get ready together at my hotel suite in town. With that settled, Ella made her escape. The pleasant warmth of her morning with Graham now overshadowed by Victoria's unexpected invitation and the sense of foreboding it brought. Throughout the week, Ella tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept returning to Sunday morning. The easy conversation with Graham, his interest in her opinions, the way his eyes had held hers across the kitchen island. Then her thoughts would inevitably shift to Victoria's strange invitation and the unsettling feeling that she was walking into a trap. On Wednesday afternoon, as Ella was dusting the library, Graham sought her out. "How are your preparations going for the gala?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Fine," she replied, though, in truth, she had no idea what to wear or what she might say about therapeutic riding. Graham seemed to read her uncertainty. "You know, you don't have to do this. I can tell Victoria you've changed your mind. And have her think I'm afraid." Ella shook her head. "I'll be fine." "Victoria can be intense about social events," Graham said carefully, "especially when it comes to impressing the right people." Ella set down her dusting cloth and turned to face him directly. "Can I ask you something personal, Mr. Westfield?" "Graham," he corrected automatically. "And yes." Why Victoria? The question had been bothering her all week. The woman seemed so different from the man she was beginning to know, the one who cared about his father's legacy and could speak so tenderly about a frightened horse. Graham looked taken aback by her directness. "That is personal," he said, but then he sighed. "Victoria comes from the world I've lived in for the past 20 years. She understands the social obligations, the business connections. She's beautiful, intelligent, and knows exactly what's expected of a successful man's wife." "That doesn't sound like love," Ella observed quietly. "Love?" Graham repeated, as if the word were foreign. "At our age, marriage is more about compatibility and shared goals." But he didn't meet her eyes as he said it. "I see." Ella picked up her dusting cloth again, signaling an end to the conversation. "If you'll excuse me, I need to finish in here before starting dinner." Graham lingered in the doorway. "Ella, about Saturday—" "It's fine," she interrupted. "I appreciate your concern, but I can handle Victoria and her friends." After a moment, Graham nodded and left her to her work. But Ella couldn't help noticing that he seemed troubled, and she wondered if he was having second thoughts about the gala, about Victoria, or perhaps about something more. On Saturday evening, precisely at 6, Victoria's sleek BMW pulled up outside Ella's small rental house on the edge of town. Ella had spent the afternoon gathering her courage, reminding herself that she had faced down Victoria's cruelty at the racetrack and emerged victorious. Whatever the woman had planned for tonight, Ella would face it with the same dignity. She had packed a simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, purchased for her mother's funeral years ago, but Victoria had insisted on providing something more suitable. Given Victoria's expensive tastes, Ella was curious despite her wariness. Victoria barely looked at Ella's modest home as she led her to the car. "We're running a bit late," she said briskly. "The stylist is already waiting at the hotel." The drive into town was filled with Victoria's one-sided conversation about who would be attending the gala and how important it was to make the right impression. Ella sat quietly, observing how Victoria's perfectly manicured hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly whenever she mentioned Graham's name. The hotel suite was a flurry of activity when they arrived. A hairstylist and makeup artist were setting up their equipment, and several garment bags were hanging in the bedroom. "You'll be in the blue dress," Victoria instructed, pointing to one of the bags. "I've already checked the size. It should fit well enough." As the professionals went to work on their hair and makeup, Victoria kept up a stream of chatter with them, barely acknowledging Ella except to issue occasional directions. "More natural makeup for Ella. We want her to look like herself, just better." Finally, it was time to dress. Victoria disappeared into the bathroom with her garment bag, leaving Ella to change in the bedroom. When Ella unzipped the bag Victoria had indicated, she gasped. The dress inside was indeed blue. A harsh electric blue in a stiff, shiny fabric that looked cheap despite what was certainly a designer price tag. The cut was unflattering, a boxy silhouette with an awkward hemline that would hit at the worst possible point on her legs. It was exactly the opposite of the elegant vintage dress she'd worn to the races, clearly chosen to make her look as ungainly as possible. Ella stood staring at it, understanding dawning. This was Victoria's revenge, to parade her in front of the same people who had admired her at the racetrack, but this time in a dress deliberately selected to make her look ridiculous. For a moment, Ella considered refusing to wear it, but she knew that was exactly what Victoria expected, that she would back out, appearing ungrateful and confirming Victoria's narrative that she didn't belong in their world. With determined hands, Ella took the dress from its hanger. She would wear it, speak about therapeutic riding as requested, and maintain her dignity regardless of how she looked. Graham had said she showed what real class looked like, not through designer labels, but through character. Tonight would test that theory. Victoria emerged from the bathroom in a stunning red gown that highlighted her perfect figure, her blonde hair styled in an elegant updo. Her eyes widened with barely concealed satisfaction when she saw Ella in the blue dress. "Oh, my," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "That's different than I expected. The shop assistant assured me it was very fashion-forward." Ella met her gaze steadily. "It's fine, Ms. Chambers, thank you for providing it." Victoria's smile faltered slightly at Ella's composure. She had clearly expected tears or refusal, not this quiet acceptance. "Well then," she said briskly, "we should go. Graham is meeting us at the event." As they drove to the Preston estate, Ella mentally rehearsed what she might say about therapeutic riding. Despite Victoria's obvious attempt to humiliate her through clothing, Ella was genuinely passionate about the cause itself. If she focused on the horses and the children they could help, perhaps she could salvage some dignity from the evening. The Preston estate was ablaze with lights as they arrived. Valets rushed to open their car doors, and photographers snapped pictures of guests ascending the grand staircase to the entrance. Victoria plastered on her social smile as they joined the procession. "Remember," she murmured to Ella as they approached the door, "when Graham presents the check, I'll introduce you for your little speech. Just keep it brief. These people aren't interested in lectures." Inside, the ballroom was a glittering showcase of wealth and privilege. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, illuminating walls adorned with priceless artwork. Elegantly, dressed guests mingled, champagne flutes in hand, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Ella immediately felt the stares and whispers as she entered beside Victoria. The blue dress was even more obviously wrong in this setting, its harsh color and unflattering cut, standing out among the sophisticated evening wear of the other women. But she held her head high, remembering Martha Jenkins's advice. "When they look at you like you don't belong, look right back as if you own the place." Victoria, meanwhile, was clearly enjoying the spectacle she had created. She guided Ella through the crowd, making introductions with barely disguised amusement. "You. Remember Ella, Graham's housekeeper? She was so lovely at the races that I simply had to include her tonight." Some of the guests were openly puzzled by Ella's appearance, clearly remembering the elegant woman from the racetrack and unable to reconcile her with the awkwardly dressed figure before them now. Others smiled with thinly veiled condescension, immediately understanding and appreciating Victoria's cruel joke. And then Graham appeared, handsome in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His eyes found Ella immediately, widening slightly at her appearance. He moved toward them, his expression unreadable. "Victoria. Ella." He nodded to each of them in turn. "You both look colorful tonight." Victoria slipped her arm through his, possessively. "Isn't Ella's dress interesting? The boutique assured me it was the latest European trend." Graham's eyes met Ella's, and in that moment she knew he understood exactly what Victoria had done. A muscle tightened in his jaw. "It's certainly distinctive," he said carefully. "Ella, may I speak with you for a moment?" Before Victoria could object, Graham led Ella toward a quiet corner of the ballroom. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have realized Victoria might—" "It's all right," Ella interrupted. "It's just a dress." Graham's gaze traveled over the unflattering garment. "This was deliberate. She's trying to embarrass you." "I know," Ella admitted, "but I won't give her the satisfaction of being upset about it." Admiration flickered in Graham's eyes. "You're remarkable," he said softly. Before Ella could respond, Mrs. Preston, the hostess, approached them. "Graham, there you are. We're ready for the presentation whenever you are." Graham nodded. "We'll be right there." As Mrs. Preston moved away, he turned back to Ella. "Are you sure you're comfortable with this? I can make an excuse." "No," Ella said firmly. "I'm here to talk about therapeutic riding. That's what matters, not how I look." Something shifted in Graham's expression, a softening, a recognition. Without warning, he reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze before releasing it. "Let's get this over with," he said. As they moved toward the small stage where the presentation would take place, Victoria intercepted them, eyes flashing at their brief moment of connection. "There you are," she said, her voice tight. "Everyone's waiting." The trio made their way to the stage where a microphone had been set up. Mrs. Preston introduced Graham with effusive praise for his generosity, and he stepped forward to present an oversized check to the charity representative. The crowd applauded politely. Then Victoria glided forward, taking the microphone with practiced ease. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat tonight. As you know, this wonderful charity provides therapeutic riding experiences for disadvantaged children. To give us some insight into this important work, I've invited someone with unique qualifications to say a few words." Her pause was deliberate, her smile predatory as she turned to Ella. "Some of you may remember meeting Ella Morgan at the Governor's Cup last weekend. What you may not know is that before becoming Graham's housekeeper, Ella worked with horses on her family's modest farm. The emphasis on modest and housekeeper was subtle but unmistakable, a reminder to everyone of Ella's place. Ella, please come share your thoughts on therapeutic riding." As Ella moved to the microphone in her garish blue dress, she could feel the mixture of curiosity, pity, and amusement in the crowd's gaze. Victoria stood to the side, eyes gleaming with triumph, while Graham watched with concern from the other side of the stage. This was the moment Victoria had orchestrated. Ella on display, dressed ridiculously, marked as an outsider in this world of wealth and privilege. Whatever she said now, Victoria believed the image alone would undo all the positive impressions Ella had made at the racetrack. Taking a deep breath, Ella looked out at the sea of faces and began to speak. In that moment, as Ella stood before the microphone in the gaudy blue dress Victoria had chosen to humiliate her, she made a decision. She would not speak about herself or make excuses for her appearance. Instead, she would focus entirely on what mattered: the horses and the children they could help. "Good evening," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm honored to speak to you tonight about therapeutic riding programs." She paused, looking out at the sea of elegant guests, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely disguised pity. From the corner of her eye, she could see Victoria's satisfied smirk and Graham's concerned expression. "I'd like to tell you about a horse named Starlight," Ella continued. "My father rescued her when I was 12 years old. She'd been abused, left in a muddy paddock without proper care. She was terrified of people, especially men." The ballroom had gone quiet, the guests who had been whispering about her appearance now drawn into her story despite themselves. "For months, my father worked with her, using nothing but patience and kindness. He never raised his voice, never forced her to do anything. He simply showed her day after day that not all humans would hurt her." Ella's voice grew stronger as she spoke about what she knew and loved. "The day Starlight finally let my father touch her without flinching was the day I understood that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only through consistent care and respect." She looked directly at several of the wealthier guests now. When a child has been hurt or neglected, they build walls just like Starlight did. They expect pain, not kindness. A therapeutic riding program doesn't just teach them to ride, it teaches them to trust again. The horse doesn't care what clothes they wear, what neighborhood they come from, or what mistakes they've made. A horse only responds to how it's treated in the present moment. Ella's gaze moved to Graham, whose eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. Every child deserves the chance to feel that connection, to know they can communicate with and guide a 1,000-pound animal through nothing but gentle persistence and mutual respect. It builds confidence no classroom can teach. She smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed her face and somehow made the garish dress seem less important. Your generous donations tonight will give children that opportunity. They'll learn what my father taught me, that patience, kindness, and respect can overcome the deepest fears. Thank you. As Ella stepped away from the microphone, there was a moment of silence, then applause. Real applause. Not the polite, perfunctory kind, but enthusiastic and heartfelt. Victoria's face had frozen in a tight smile, her plan clearly backfiring. She had expected Ella to be awkward and out of place, to ramble nervously or speak simplistically about horses. Instead, Ella had delivered a touching, articulate speech that resonated with everyone in the room. As Ella made her way off the stage, several guests approached her with genuine interest, asking questions about therapeutic riding programs and sharing stories of their own experiences with horses. The ugly dress, which had seemed so important when she arrived, was now barely noticed as people engaged with her words rather than her appearance. Graham watched from a distance, a strange mixture of emotions playing across his face. Pride, certainly, at how Ella had handled herself. But there was something else too, a realization dawning in his eyes as he observed the stark contrast between Victoria's calculated cruelty and Ella's simple grace. Victoria, meanwhile, was working the room with increasing desperation, drawing attention to herself and away from Ella. But her efforts had a brittle quality now, her laughter too loud, her gestures too expansive. She certainly is earnest, isn't she? Victoria said loudly to a group that included several influential ranchers. So refreshing to have someone speak from their humble experiences rather than academic knowledge. But her attempt at backhanded praise fell flat. One of the ranchers, an elderly gentleman with a weathered face, turned to Victoria with a cool stare. "That humble woman knows more about horse psychology than most trainers I've hired," he said. Graham is lucky to have found someone with her insight. Victoria's face flushed as the group drifted away, leaving her alone with her champagne, glass, and her fury. Across the room, Ella had found a quiet corner to catch her breath. The emotional toll of the evening, from Victoria's attempt to humiliate her to the unexpected positive reception of her speech, had left her feeling drained. "May I join you?" Graham's voice was soft beside her. Ella looked up, nodding her permission. That was... Graham seemed to search for the right word. "Beautiful. Your speech. Not just what you said, but how you said it." "Thank you," Ella replied simply. "I owe you an apology," he continued, his voice low and serious. "I should have realized what Victoria was planning. I should have protected you from this." Ella shook her head. "I don't need protecting, Graham. And strangely enough, I'm grateful for this evening." He looked surprised. "Grateful? After she deliberately chose that dress to make you look ridiculous?" Ella finished for him. "Yes, but in doing so she proved something important." "What's that?" "That what matters isn't what you wear or how much money you have. It's who you are when things get difficult." She smoothed her hands over the hideous blue fabric. "This dress didn't stop me from speaking my truth, and it didn't stop people from listening." Graham looked at her with growing wonder. "You're amazing," he said softly. "Do you know that?" Before Ella could respond, Victoria appeared beside them, her smile brittle and her eyes cold. "There you are, darling," she said to Graham, ignoring Ella completely. "The governor is asking for you. Something about a potential business opportunity." She tugged at his arm. "Come along." Graham didn't move. "In a moment, Victoria." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "It's important, Graham. Much more important than..." Her gaze flicked dismissively to Ella. "Whatever this is." "This," Graham said deliberately, "is a conversation with someone I respect. Someone who just gave a moving speech that impressed everyone in the room, despite your obvious attempts to set her up for failure." Victoria's mask slipped just for an instant, revealing the rage beneath. But she recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Don't be absurd. Why would I want Ella to fail? I'm the one who invited her." "Yes," Graham said evenly. "You invited her, selected a deliberately unflattering dress, and positioned her to speak in front of everyone who had admired her at the races. It wasn't kind, Victoria. In fact, it was cruel." Victoria's face hardened. "Kind? You think I should be kind to the woman who's trying to steal my fiancé? Please, Graham. I've seen how you look at her. Ella stood up, mortified. I should go. This is between you two. No, Graham said firmly, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. This concerns you too, Ella. Please stay. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her champagne glass. So this is how it's going to be. You're choosing your housekeeper over me? I'm choosing decency, Graham replied. I'm choosing someone who cares about horses and people rather than social status. I'm choosing someone whose compassion and integrity shine through no matter what she's wearing. He turned to face Ella, his expression softening. If she'll have me. The room seemed to fall away as Ella stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. Graham, Victoria gave a harsh laugh. This is ridiculous. You're throwing away our relationship, our future, for what? Some farm girl fantasy? Graham finally turned back to Victoria. I'm sorry, Victoria. You're a beautiful, accomplished woman, but we want different things from life. I think deep down, we've both known that for some time. Victoria's face contorted with fury. You'll regret this, she hissed. Then, in a final act of spite, she raised her champagne glass and deliberately tipped it, splashing the golden liquid down the front of Ella's already unfortunate dress. Gasps sounded from nearby guests who witnessed the scene. Victoria thrust her empty glass at a passing waiter and strode away, her red gown cutting a path through the startled crowd. Ella stood frozen, champagne dripping from her dress onto the polished floor. For a moment, she thought she might cry, not from the ruined dress or public humiliation, but from the overwhelming emotion of everything that had just happened. Then, unexpectedly, she began to laugh. The situation was so absurd, so melodramatic, that laughter seemed the only reasonable response. Graham looked at her in surprise. Then a slow smile spread across his face, and he started laughing too. For a moment, they stood together in their shared mirth, ignoring the curious stares from around the room. Come on, Graham said, taking her hand. Let's get out of here. He led her through the ballroom, past the whispers and stares, out onto a wide terrace that overlooked the Prestons' expansive gardens. The night air was cool and sweet, a welcome relief from the tension inside. I'm sorry about your dress, Graham said as they stood at the stone balustrade, looking out at the moonlit landscape. Ella shook her head. Don't be. I'm not. No? No. Because now I never have to wear it again. She smiled up at him. I suspect that was Victoria's parting gift, an excuse to go home and change. Graham's expression grew serious. Did you mean what you said in there, about choosing me? Graham ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking almost boyish in his uncertainty. I meant every word. These past weeks, especially since the race, I've really seen you for the first time. And I've realized something important. What's that? Ella asked softly. That I've been living someone else's life, playing a role I thought I was supposed to play, the successful businessman, the wealthy ranch owner with the perfect socialite fiancé. He took both her hands in his. But the moments I've felt most alive recently have been the simple ones. Working with you and Morning Glory in the stables, sharing breakfast in my kitchen, watching you speak from your heart tonight. Ella's pulse quickened at his words, but caution held her back. Graham, we come from different worlds. A few nice moments don't change that. Maybe it's time I return to my father's world, he said. He built Westfield, ranch through hard work and a genuine love for the land and animals. Since his death, I've treated it like a status symbol, rather than the working ranch it was meant to be. He gazed out at the moonlit garden, then back at Ella. I want to rebuild what my father created. Not just the business, but the spirit of the place, and I can't imagine doing that without you. As your housekeeper? Ella asked, needing clarity. Graham shook his head. No, as my partner in every sense. Ella's breath caught. Graham, this is happening so fast. A month ago, you barely noticed I existed. A month ago, I was blind, he admitted. But seeing you with the horses, watching how you connect with them, listening to you speak tonight, it's like finally seeing clearly after years of fog. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I understand if you need time. I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I really am and who we could be together. Ella looked up at him, This man who had transformed from arrogant employer to something entirely different before her eyes. And who is the real Graham Westfield? A man who wants to honor his father's legacy. A man who's learning, too late perhaps, that true value isn't measured in bank accounts or social connections. His eyes held hers intently. A man who's falling in love with his housekeeper. The word love hung in the air between them. Fragile and powerful. Ella felt tears spring to her eyes, unexpected and unstoppable. "Hey," Graham said gently, reaching up to brush a tear from her cheek. "I didn't mean to upset you." "You didn't," she assured him. "It's just a lot to take in." "I know." He smiled ruefully. "And you're standing here in a champagne-soaked dress that my ex-fiancé chose to humiliate you. Not exactly the romantic setting I would have chosen for this conversation." Ella laughed despite her tears. "It's certainly memorable." Graham's expression grew tender. "May I take you home? And maybe we could talk more tomorrow, perhaps while working with mourning." "Glory?" Ella nodded, a warm sense of possibility unfurling in her chest. "I'd like that." Yet the next few weeks passed in a gentle, gradual shift of their relationship. Graham insisted that Ella continue her work at the ranch house while they explored their changing feelings, not wanting her to feel financially vulnerable. As they navigated these new waters, but the dynamics had changed completely. Ella was no longer invisible to him. They shared meals together, worked side by side with the horses, and spent long evenings talking about their dreams and memories. News of Graham and Victoria's broken engagement spread quickly through local society. Victoria returned to Dallas, spreading rumors about Graham's midlife crisis and infatuation with the help. But such gossip seemed very distant from the peaceful reality of life at Westfield Ranch. A month after the charity gala, Graham surprised Ella by asking her to accompany him to a special location on the property, a hilltop overlooking the entire ranch, with views that stretched for miles in every direction. "My father proposed to my mother on this spot," Graham told her, as they stood together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "He always said a man should be able to show his future wife the world he wanted to build, with her." Ella's heart skipped a beat, but she maintained her composure. "It's beautiful up here." "When I was a boy," Graham continued, "he would bring me here to talk about the future of the ranch. He'd point out where he planned to expand the stables, where he wanted to build new paddocks, how he envisioned the property growing and thriving." He turned to her, taking her hands in his. "I'd like to do that now, share my vision with you. But I can't imagine any future for Westfield Ranch that doesn't include you, Ella." From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box. "I know it's soon. I know some people will talk, but I've wasted too many years living a life that wasn't true to who I really am or what I really want." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not a flashy diamond like Victoria had worn, but a beautiful emerald set in vintage gold, with tiny diamonds flanking it on either side. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "A farm girl like you who married my grandfather when he had nothing but dreams and determination. My father kept it for me, though I never understood why he didn't want me to give it to Victoria." His eyes crinkled. "Now I understand. He was waiting for me to find someone worthy of it, someone with the same spirit of hard work, honesty, and love that made his own marriage so strong." Ella stared at the ring, her heart full to bursting. "Graham, I love you, Ella Morgan," he said simply. "I love your kindness, your integrity, your gentle way with frightened animals and arrogant ranch owners." His smile was tender. "Will you marry me? Will you help me rebuild Westfield Ranch into the place my father always envisioned, a working ranch run with love and respect for the land and animals?" Tears filled Ella's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man holding it. The transformation in him over these past weeks had been remarkable, the return of a decent, hard-working man who had been hidden beneath years of corporate polish and social posturing. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "Yes, I will." As Graham slipped the ring onto her finger, the setting sun cast long shadows across the ranch below them, the stables where they had first truly connected, the fields where horses grazed peacefully, the house that would now truly become a home. Graham pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like a promise of partnership, of shared dreams, of a love built on mutual respect rather than social expectations. When they finally pulled apart, Ella laughed softly. "What will your society friends say? The millionaire and his housekeeper?" Graham smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "They'll say I'm the luckiest man in the county, and they'll be right." 1 year later, the Westfield Ranch open house was in full swing. Graham had revived his father's tradition of inviting the community to tour the ranch, see the horses, and enjoy an afternoon of country hospitality. Ella, no longer a housekeeper, but the ranch's co-owner and horse therapy program director, moved through the crowd greeting guests and answering questions about their newly established therapeutic riding center for disadvantaged children. The filly Morning Glory, now fully recovered and gentle as a lamb, was the star attraction, patiently carrying children on supervised rides around the paddock. The transformation in the once frightened horse mirrored the transformation of the ranch itself, from a showplace back to a working farm with heart and purpose. Graham was across the yard, deep in conversation with a local farmer about sustainable grazing practices. Catching Ella's eye, he smiled and excused himself, making his way to her side. "How are the therapy demonstrations going?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Wonderfully," Ella replied, leaning into him. "2 families have already signed. Up for the summer program." Graham pressed a kiss to her temple. "My father would be proud of what we've built here." "Yes, he would," came an unexpected voice behind them. They turned to find Richard, Graham's former business associate, standing with his wife Diane. They hadn't seen the couple since breaking the news of their engagement. "Richard," Graham said, surprised but polite. "I didn't expect to see you here." The older man smiled. "When we heard about your therapeutic riding program, Diane insisted we come see it for ourselves. We have a granddaughter with special needs." His expression grew more serious. "And I wanted to congratulate you, both of you." "Thank you," Ella said, extending her hand. Richard took it, then looked at Graham with newfound respect. "Your father and I were friends, you know, before he passed. He gestured to the bustling ranch around them. "This is what he always wanted for Westfield. Not just success, but purpose." Graham nodded, emotion flickering across his face. "It took me too long to understand that, but you got there," Richard said, clapping him on the shoulder. "And from what I've seen today, you found the perfect partner to build it with." As Richard and Diane moved on to explore more of the ranch, Graham pulled Ella close again. "He's right, you know," he murmured. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Ella smiled up at him. "We did it together, just like we'll do everything else." Around them, the ranch hummed with activity, children laughing, horses nickering, neighbors catching up on local news. It was exactly what Graham's father had envisioned all those years ago, not a status symbol, but a vibrant part of the community. And at the center of it all stood Graham and Ella, the unlikely couple whose love had transformed not just their own lives, but the legacy of Westfield Ranch itself. As if sensing her thoughts, Graham's arms tightened around her. "Happy?" he asked softly. Ella looked around at the life they had built together, the rescued horses finding new purpose, the children discovering confidence through riding, the land being worked with care and respect. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, turning in his arms to face him fully. Graham's eyes, warm with love, held hers. "That makes 2 of us." And as he lowered his head to kiss her, right there in front of everyone, Ella knew that their story, the millionaire and his housekeeper who had found love across social divides, was just beginning its happiest chapter. The end.